Our slash chord progression for this lesson will be F over D and G over D. So let's give track 1 a listen, which has the bass, the drums, and the rhythm guitar playing these chords. You can hear the D just as a pedal tone in the bass, and the chords moving on top. Okay, now you are going to have to understand what key you're in, because that's going to reveal a lot of options. So let's look at our diagrams and all the charts that are accompanying this lesson. You see how I have it broken down with a chart that shows the chord, F over D, then the name of the chord in terms of what chord it really is. Here's what I mean. If you play an F over D, that's a slash chord name. A quick, easy way for you to assemble a more complex harmony. If you play an F over a D, it's really a D minor 7. For example, you probably know this D minor 7. Here's your regular D minor. You're flatting that D on the 3rd string, dropping it down a whole step. That gives you the flat 7. And if you look at that, take the bass note away, you're left with the top 4 strings of an F chord using a C form. Therefore, F over D is a D minor 7. Now you could also think of an F over D as an F6 in 3rd inversion, meaning it's the notes in an F6 chord, F, A, C, D, with D being the lowest note. Now the reason you might want to think that way is that it'll get you more aligned with the chord. We'll talk about this in just a few minutes. But for our first approach, you're going to say F over D is a D minor 7. So the scale you're going to play over this, or the mode, would be D Dorian. You see that on your chart in the 3rd column. The parent scale of D Dorian is C major. That means it's a C scale played from D to D. And chart, or diagram 1A, shows that plotted out all over the entire fingerboard. Now on diagram 1A, we have it labeled as D Dorian, and the notes that are in red are actually the notes that form an F arpeggio. So what that means is you have the 3 notes of a D minor 7, because you've excluded the root. Remember I told you that a D minor 7 is an F over D. So that's why the numbers look kind of funny, because you don't see the number 1 in red. I'm trying to show you how to think about the numerator. Think in terms of the numerator of the slash chord, the F over D. Because if you think about those F arpeggios, which in diagram 1A are labeled as flat 3, 5, and flat 7, those are truly the tones that you're playing over that D minor 7, okay? So we'll talk about that when we get into the soloing aspect. That's a great way for you to stay locked into the chord. Well, the next thing you see on the chart is that F6 3rd inversion would use F Lydian. All that means is you're thinking of it as, instead of mode 2 in the key of C, it's mode 4. The same notes, but you're just thinking of it from a different vantage point. That's why I have it labeled as an F6 3rd inversion. So if you look at diagram 1B, you see the F arpeggio is labeled 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, and so on, and you're looking at it in terms of F Lydian. That's just another way to solo over this chord to think about it. You might say, well, it's going to give me the same end result. Well, that may be true, but actually it won't, because you'll be thinking a different way. I call that cross-thinking, where you're not thinking off of the root of the chord, you're thinking off another scale degree. So in this case, you're thinking off the flatted 3rd of that D minor 7. Okay, so we'll get to that. That's diagram 1B. That takes care of the F over D. Well, then we need to talk about how you're going to voice these on the guitar. Now, I covered this particular progression in a previous slash chord lesson, but we're going to briefly go over it. The beauty of diagram 1B and 1A is that it'll show you how to play all of those F chords by simply playing the red notes. We'll demonstrate that in just a minute. I'll play against the jam track number 12, which is just the bass and the drums without the rhythm guitar. And all I have to do is just play F triads or any combination of those notes, F, A, and C, because then over the D bass, what do I have? The D minor 7 chord. Okay, so that's a quick overview of how we're going to approach that D minor 7 as far as big 7-note scales. Then if you look at your chart, the G over D is simply a G chord in 2nd inversion, meaning the 5th of the chord is the lowest tone. We're going to use G Mixolydian. Now the reason for that is because then we have a 2-5 progression in the key of C. D minor 7 would be the 2 chord, G or G7 would be the 5 chord. That keeps everything in the key of C, which is actually the way this will sound best. But you do have another scale option, and that's listed as the final choice right there, the G overtone mode, which is a D melodic minor scale played from G to G. We'll talk about that a little later. I just want to keep you in the key of C to get you started. Now our goal here is not for you just to jam around in a C scale. Our goal is for you to be able to target the chord tones and define in your soloing the chord changes. That's called vertical soloing. How are we going to accomplish that? Well, we're going to use arpeggios. And that's called vertical soloing, where you're orienting your playing against the chords. But let's make things a little easier right now and also use a very appropriate approach for soloing over this. The next thing you see in your chart is horizontal soloing. Now what we have here is the concept of playing one scale over both chords. That's what you do when you play the minor pentatonic and the blues scale. That happens in blues and in rock, a lot of styles of music. And you can get away with it because it just sounds strong. There's another reason too. I'll talk about that later on. But you can see on your chart I've done the same thing. The F over D is really a D minor 7, so you're thinking D minor pentatonic. The G over D, G in second inversion, you're going to play D minor pentatonic. And then the same thing, the D blues for both of those. And you have those diagrammed in diagrams 1E through 1H. All this stuff's going to be printed out. It'll be very straightforward, and the color coding helps you stay close to the chords. All right, but now I want to talk about, before we get into all the arpeggios, and there's a tremendous amount of information here, let's talk about soloing, or rather rhythm playing over this track, briefly, because I know I covered that in a previous lesson. If you play it with the bass note, it's going to tie you up a little bit, but you want to be able to do that. So let's look at some of our voicings we could use to get through this if we wanted to establish the sound all by ourselves. Let's say we had a guy playing congas next to us, and you want to define this, and all you got is solo guitar. You've got to keep the D in the bass, so you're going to play the F over D. Well, where did I get the F chord? You can see it in diagram 1A and 1B, the F-A-C right there, and you can see it coming right out of your F bar chord, right? So you're going to play F over D, which is a D minor 7. Then you're going to move up. In this progression, you have two triads a whole step apart. They are the 4 and the 5 chords in the key of C. That makes it easy. Whatever voicing you choose for the F chord, just move it up 2 frets for your G chord. Then you can do it on the top 3 strings. And you can hear I've got that D bass going. Now in this case, you could also play the 4th string open. That'll give you that D bass. Then we can continue. You'll see these in the red. I'm not going to go through this a lot. Maybe it's right in front of you. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string. So for the F, I look at diagram 1A or 1B. For the G, I look at diagram 1C. I can also look at diagram 1D because the red notes are going to be the chord tones. Let me play against track number 12, which has just the bass and the drums. And I'm going to play all these different inversions of the F chord and the G chord. I just played just those triads. Now I'm going to connect some things. Where did I get all of that stuff from? Well, I simply was connecting the arpeggios, the FAC for the F chord and the GBD with the C scale. You have the entire fingerboard plotted out with the remaining mode, either Dorian if you're on the F over D, the D minor 7, or Mixolydian if you're on the G over D. Okay, you're probably wondering, how do I know what's going to sound right? Well, obviously I've spent some time exploring this, and I can pre-hear the notes. I'll give you a little plan of how to approach this. To be thorough, you're going to try every one of the notes that's available above the chord. What I mean by that is if I play this F chord right here on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, and I choose to not disturb those strings, I'm going to keep with those notes right there, stay with those notes. What do I have on the 1st string that's available? I have an E. Now, if you look at D Dorian, that's the 2, right? That actually gives me a D minor 9 chord. I can let that ring when I go over to the G Mixolydian because now it makes it a G6. It's part of the scale. What if I held the F? Well, all I'm doing is I'm still playing a D minor 7 because I've got that flat 3 up there. You see that? I'm looking at diagram 1A, and then I move to diagram 1C. That F becomes the flat 7. What happens if I hold the G up on top? For the D Dorian, that's the 4, so now I have a D minor 7, 11 chord, and it's a nice common tone. Okay, what if I hold the A up on top? Now there I just have the 5th of the D minor 7, but now I have a G add 9. Do you see how that works? So any of those notes could be a common tone. The B is the only one that might get you... It's not bad on that D minor 7, it just makes it a D minor 7, 6. So that was one of the tools that I just used. I could do it on the 2nd string. I have a C, a D, and an E on that 2nd string. So do you see how important it is that you see your entire fingerboard, string by string, in terms of scale degrees, notes, all that business? Then you can experiment. Because you don't have to play a lot of notes, do you? You can just play 2 notes and outline the chord. I just improvised the F and the G chords with all these moving voices, all of them coming from that C scale. Okay, now I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on the rhythm guitar approach here, but this concept is critical, and you're going to apply that to each one of our progressions. At first, just learn the stock triads, the voicings, all 3 inversions, root position, 1st inversion, 2nd inversion. If you don't know what that means, let me give you a quick overview. If I play an F chord, and F is the lowest note, F, A, C, that's called root position. If the A, the 3rd of the chord, is the lowest tone, it's in 1st inversion. If the C is the lowest tone, it's in 2nd inversion. So you really only have 3 inversions when you're playing them this way, and you're playing them on adjacent strings. Now you can also do a lot of things where you're skipping strings and adding other notes and playing open voicings. Play around with that. I could go on for days on this business, so I'd have to cut it short and just get you going on the rhythm playing here. Okay? But now this same information will help you when you're soloing. Here's why. If you learn where all these voicings are, for example, all of the F chords, then anytime you play over a D minor 7, you will have the flatted 3rd, the 5th, and the flatted 7th notes of the chord available. That's what's presented in diagram 1A. The notes of the F chord form the flatted 3rd, the 5th, and the flat 7. So you've got some strong markers to orient your playing over. Okay? Now that's how we approached rhythm guitar, but the same information serves us for our lead playing. Let's go to our lead playing. Now in this, I'm going to go to a little dirtier sound, well, pretty dirty sound as a matter of fact. We're going to play along with the jam track number 1, which already has the chords in place. I threw those on at home, and the track's about 2 minutes long. I would have loved to have given you a 2-hour track because I think that'd be good for you. So make sure you practice looping this track, hook it up so you can just keep doing reps. But we're going to look at the horizontal soloing approach. Let's look at the diagrams that you have available. Now you already have the modes, right? So we'll get back to those in just a minute. I want to get into some information that's probably more familiar and it's a little easier for you. Diagrams 1E through 1H. Generally, if I tell you can play minor pentatonic, you can also play the blues scale, and that is the case here. So we can play horizontally over the entire track, over both chords, and be very effective by playing just D minor pentatonic / D blues. Probably the scale you would be the most comfortable with would be 6th-string root up there in 10th position. That's the minor pentatonic. And you can see I'll do it slower. I'm on diagram 1E up there in the 10th fret. You have root, flat third, 4th, 5th, flat 7. Then it just repeats. If you look at diagram 1G, it's the same pentatonic scale, but we have the sharp 4 added in there, right? Okay, I'm going to play against a little bit of the track, just maybe 30 seconds of it or whatever, and just play a little bit of blues stuff with this minor pentatonic / blues scale approach. Sounds pretty strong, doesn't it? It's a very effective way of soloing over that track. You're just playing the D minor pentatonic or the D blues scale. Okay? So I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on that. Anytime you have this progression, which we categorize as a 2-5 in the key of C, because it's F over D and G over D, and it's really D minor 7th and G. It's a 2-5 in the key of C, so the rule is you can play minor pentatonic off the 2 chord, off the 1st chord of the progression. Okay? So put that in the old memory bank, and you probably were already comfortable with this. You probably had a handle on this kind of approach. But let's go back to this concept of the modes and the scales. Now, the way I have this laid out, if you look at the arpeggios for the D Dorian, which is the F over D, and the G Mixolydian, we have those red notes, which are really strong tones. So we said that those would be very effective at sounding vertical in your soloing. Well, if we go over to just scales, you can get yourself in trouble. You have to know the scales, but you can end up just kind of meandering around. So we're looking at diagrams 1A through 1C, and it's really all the same key, isn't it? It's a C major scale. Let's just play against that same track for just maybe 20 seconds or whatever, and I'll stay in that same position where we had the D minor pentatonic scale, and I'll play around a little bit, but then I'm going to show you how to get stronger with what you're going to solo with.